Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 476 of the Juicebox Podcast. I have a treat for you today. Today's episode is with Deva, and I'm just going to say it, she's my best friend. But this episode comes with more than just a pithy little opening. It comes with a money-back guarantee. If you don't love Deva and this conversation, everything you paid today to listen to the podcast will be refunded back to you 100% in the form of an expired gift card. But if you love this episode, do something for me. I'll ask you in 1 second after the music. First, let me tell you a couple of things. Here's the big one. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. All right, the person you're about to hear was diagnosed as an adult, but they have an incredible attachment to type 1 diabetes from their childhood. It's an amazing story, and somehow around the 1 hour mark, we just really get into it. I hope you like this. So when this is all over, if you enjoy it as much as I said, please take 5 minutes to go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Click on the link that says join our registry now, and then fill out the simple survey. That's it. You have to be a type 1 or the caregiver of a type 1, and you need to be from the United States. If you are those things, or one of those things, I guess you could be both. You could have type 1, be from the United States, and be the parent of a kid with type 1. I don't get bonus points for that if you are, but still, I guess you could be. We're getting away from the point. The point is, if you are one of those people, clicking on join our registry now, filling out that simple survey will do huge things for people living with type 1 diabetes. And it helps the podcast, so it's a real bonus. This is going to be 100% anonymous, so none of your answers will be attached to you. It is HIPAA compliant. It does not require you to ever go anywhere, right? You just do it from your couch, sofa. Some people call it a sofa, some people call it a couch. I'll let you wonder what I call it. But right now in your mind, you know what you call it, right? Again, we've gotten away from the whole thing here. Anyway, from wherever you're sitting right now, iPad, from your phone, from a computer, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Past participants like you have helped to bring increased coverage for test strips, Medicare coverage for CGMs, and changes to the ADA guidelines for pediatric A1C goals. This is a big thing that you can do in a tiny amount of time. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com. We'll start with you just introducing yourself, pretty basically, and I'll ask some questions and we'll talk, and that'll sort of be it. And it'll come out delightfully.
Okay, I love that you use that word. I want you to describe me as delightful. I think you say that so nicely when you introduce other people.
I do. If you force it, I don't know what I can do, but I'll see what happens. Like, what happens now? Now this part's going to end up in the podcast. What happens if you're not delightful? And the whole time I'm like, I got to wait for this lady to say something reasonable so I can.
Then maybe you won't post it. I don't know. There's always that option. If I'm not delightful, we may have a deal. You don't have to post it. How's that?
I've never not put up one episode that I recorded, except for 2 where the people who I recorded with later, I think, realized that they maybe had been much too honest about a health issue. But other than that, it's never. One person had what I consider to be an actual breakdown while we were recording, and I suggested that we don't let anybody hear it.
Wow.
And then there was just
okay. I imagine you get that a lot. People get very emotional.
I think people do get emotional, and that's interesting, isn't it? That you would unburden yourself to a stranger, but I'm assuming have all kinds of people around you that you know and never say anything to. I wonder if the podcast doesn't make people feel closer to me because they hear me so much.
Oh, that is for sure true. I feel like you're my best friend because I don't talk to anybody about my diabetes. Oh. Everyone who knows me, I was diagnosed 2 years ago at age 47. I'm now 49. Everybody who knows me already. I don't have new friends now. Yeah. My social group is my social group. And it's not like this has been a topic that we grew up with together. So it just never comes up. So I feel like you're my best friend. Well, your podcast, and I'm not exaggerating, saved my life.
Oh, well, we'll get to all that. And by the way, if your friends were really good friends, one or two of them would get diabetes so they could be there.
Right. Yeah. Good point.
I don't know how we would do that, but
Although I imagine, given my age group, if anybody else got diabetes, it would more than likely be type 2.
You might think, right? It's crazy that, well, all right, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Deva, and I am type 1 diabetic, diagnosed 2 years ago, misdiagnosed, I should say, as type 2 at first, and 3 months later, properly diagnosed as type 1. And what else do you want to know? My particularly emotional side to all of this is that when I was 14, my 12-year-old sister died suddenly from type 1 diabetes. And that just hit that just came crashing down like a ton of bricks when I got diagnosed. Even though logically, I know nowadays it's very different. We're talking back in the 80s, nowadays it's very different. I don't plan on dying in my sleep. I plan on living to ripe old age of 100, Yeah. But it's still in the back of your head, like, oh my God, this is really serious. And I'm not so sure how much the world really understands that. Your group, your listeners know that, but let's say in my social group, I don't think people understand that this is really serious.
Okay. So you've said a lot. We're going to unpack it and figure things out. So say your first name again. I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly.
Deva.
Okay.
Deva,
where do you live?
I live in Israel.
Born there?
I was not born here. No. I moved here in, I want to say 2000. So I've been here 20 years.
Wow. Can you say from where you moved from?
I moved from Lower Manhattan.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you were running from like organized crime and you didn't want to say or anything like that.
No. Oh, that would make a fun story. No. I moved here just, I'm Jewish and I just wanted to be, in Israel. So I'm here.
And you've been there for 20 years.
And by the way, best healthcare system ever. I pay $35 a month for all my diabetes needs.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah, no, right? It's a reason to move.
Hey, Owen Lieberman lives there. He has type 1, the CNN correspondent for Israel.
I should know him, but I don't.
He has type 1. He's been on the show. Maybe you could find a friend in Israel.
I will have to. I need new friends.
Imagine if you're crazy and Owen sends me a note and he's like, hey, thanks a lot for sending Deva over to me.
There you go.
Hey, she seems okay, Owen. Don't worry about it. And we're best friends, so it'll be fine.
Exactly. I told you you're my best friend.
All right, well, let's go a little slow here for a second. So you brought it up, so let's figure this out. You're saying about 35 years ago, your sister passed. And so was she undiagnosed as type 1?
Oh,
no.
She was properly diagnosed. She was 5. I was 7. We were driving down from Manhattan to my grandparents in DC for Thanksgiving weekend. And we stopped the car so she can pee on the side of the road. I want to say every 20 minutes. It's a long drive from Manhattan to Washington, D.C.
Right.
And I remember it like yesterday. And we got to D.C. and it was obvious something was wrong. And she was diagnosed there. She went straight from D.C. They flew to Jocelyn. She was properly diagnosed and she was taken care of to the best of, my parents' abilities back in their late 70s.
Yeah.
Whatever was available then she did.
Gotcha.
Of course, it was urine sticks, but she was definitely being taken care of.
Yeah, people weren't ignoring it. I wasn't sure because you said she passed in her sleep. I wasn't sure if she maybe just went into DKA before she was diagnosed or if she was living with it.
I obviously don't know. I was young myself, so I don't know the exact details of what happened. It could have been insulin shock. Who knows?
Yeah,
but
all those words.
She was definitely managed. She was being managed to the best of my parents' abilities at that time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you don't know if it was a situation where it was too much insulin or not enough.
I don't
You wouldn't know. Yeah, you were young. Yeah.
I was young, and my parents at the time, the doctors would have been okay, doing more research and autopsy, whatever. My parents just felt like, what's the difference? At this point, she was gone at that point, and it didn't matter. And they decided not to pursue it further. So I'm not even sure they did know. And if they did, they certainly didn't share it with me. So I have no idea.
Yeah, people might not understand. The 70s was a significantly different time. I try to explain to my children sometime as they're voicing their opinions and I'm listening and we're having a conversation. Like once in a while, I want to say to them, you realize my dad and mom would have never listened to anything that I thought, right? Like I would have started making a noise and they would have been like, and then just walked away from me.
Right.
Yeah, it's and you have a lot of siblings, is that right?
Yes, I'm one of 7.
Wow. Yeah. Your parents were probably tired, I would think.
my parents were tired. Indeed.
No kidding. And your poor mom's uterus. You know what I'm saying? Take a beating, I'm imagining.
God bless. What should I tell you?
Do you have any kids?
I have 2.
2, okay.
Yeah. My son is 15 and my daughter's 10.
Gotcha. Oh, wow. So they've grown up exclusively. You had both your children in Israel. They're Israeli.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So nobody else in your family's ever had diabetes with the exception of you and your sister.
In my immediate family, no. I have some cousins with diabetes. Some are better taking care of themselves than others, but it is in the family. The fact that I have it wasn't a huge surprise because it is in the family. My grandfather certainly died from diabetes. It wasn't a surprise. What was so surprised for me is my age. I was diagnosed at 47.
Right.
That I think do you hear about that? Like among your listeners, I feel like that's pretty rare.
Well, the people are diagnosed. I think at this point, I've spoken to someone diagnosed at every age between, 0 and I think 66 at this point.
Wow.
Wow. So it does happen. I don't know that I'm sure it's more or less likely in some, swaths of age, but I also think it's so much to do with, genetics and everything. I'm going to ask a question. If I mispronounce a word, you'll forgive me. Are you Orthodox or Hasidic by any chance? Or with the family, I should say?
If being pinned into a corner, I would say Orthodox. Although, of course, I have no way of knowing how you are defining the word.
My question is really it's not about religion. It's about smaller communities where people maybe marry a little closer to their.
No. So you're talking about a Hasidic community, and no, the answer to that is no.
Gotcha. Because I have a very close friend who's a NICU nurse at a major hospital, and she says that most of the real malformations that they see with newborns come from that population.
Yeah. I'm not what we call inbreeding. It's just.
I was just wondering if it was possible that I don't know why. I'm picking through things. So
I don't think that's a factor here.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, you in your note to me, your note was very passionate. I very much appreciated it. And you really seem to want to talk about the passing of your sister a little bit. And if I'm not wrong about that, I'd appreciate hearing the story, I guess. Am I wrong or am I right?
No, no.
It's just hard, I know.
You're not wrong.
Okay.
That is when I initially reached out to you because it was, I guess I was having an emotional day, which happens. But overall, it's not just her passing because I've been dealing with that for 40 years, but just in general, the emotional side of diabetes, like the technical side, the medical side, what you're teaching, spot on. I feel like I got it. My A1C's in the, I want to say high 5s. It's good. And it's been that way since, 3 months after diagnosis. Like it's all good.
Okay.
But still, I feel, and I don't know if this is because I'm still dealing with the shock of it, but the emotional side of it, and I don't know if that's typical for everyone who gets newly diagnosed, or I'm adding the layer of my sister dying to the fact that I'm so emotional about it. Like if someone starts talking to me, I will probably start crying. And there's no reason to. I'm well, I'm healthy, I'm well taken care of. We've got excellent medical care here. Like I said, my A1C is awesome. Like there's no reason why I'm taking this so hard. And I don't know what it is. Is it because it's just like a major change to my life, or is it the fact that I'm just like reliving my sister dying? I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
So it could be. So you're asking me, is that what I want to talk about? I have no idea. I don't know.
Well,
I have no idea. But I do have some general questions for you, but we don't have to get to that now. We have a few minutes. So anyways, keep going.
Oh, I'm excited you have questions. Well, I mean,
I do.
Obviously.
I made a list.
Thank you. I appreciate you being prepared. I hope you don't mind that I'm not prepared. No, but I like talking like this better. I like kind of picking through things. Because, I mean, obviously, it would at best be pop psychology to say that, you know, your sister died under what probably felt like reasonably mysterious circumstances, although you could point to the diabetes. And at such a formidable age for you, and you, listen, you told a story in the email that she and you were in the same bedroom and had.
Oh my God, I said that.
You told me. Do you want to tell me about that? Because I think
sure.
we're going to figure
It's
out.
not private.
Go ahead.
It's not.
It's private, but it won't be soon. Go ahead.
I mean, how many listeners do you have these days? What are we up to? 3 million or something?
A couple people are going to hear about it. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. One big open book. So we were. She and I shared a bedroom. That is true, and we got into this fight. I don't even remember what it was about, although if I had to guess, I'm sure it was because I was just picking a fight for no reason, because that's very much my personality. And we were fighting, and I basically told her that she can't sleep in the room. She has to go sleep in the guest room. And because she was so sweet and just younger and just wanted to keep the peace, she left. She left the room, and then she went to sleep in the guest room. And I went to wake her up for school the next day because we did have to make the bus, and she was obviously gone. Now, I didn't know that at 14 that she was gone. I had no way of really telling about. I went to my mom and I said, "Listen, she's not waking up, but I got to go get ready. So you deal with her." And then the next thing I know, the paramedics are in the house, and that was it.
Wow.
So the fight was very unfortunate. My mom, in a few minutes of complete lucidity, is that a real word? That's a word, right?
It is now.
It is now lucidness, whatever. She was lucid for those few moments. She turned to me before the funeral and she said, "There is nothing you could have done. You wouldn't have heard. You wouldn't have known. This had nothing to do with her sleeping alone." And whether it's true or not, who knows? My mom said it to make me feel better. It worked. It made me just take a deep breath and realize maybe she's right, maybe she's not. I don't know, but at least I had the opportunity to feel like maybe my mom was right. Maybe there was nothing I could have done. Who knows? I'm not a doctor. I don't know, but it put it to rest for at least that initial time, which was so difficult. But looking back years later, I'm not so sure. People don't have seizures. I don't know what happened to her. They're not so quiet. I'm not so sure what happened. Who knows?
Yeah.
50-50.
So it sticks in your head that if she had a seizure, you might have heard it and woke her up. And
I definitely would have heard it.
Come to your parents, maybe.
I definitely would have heard it. There's no way we would have slept through a seizure because she had some of them. She'd had them. Like I would have known. I would have known for sure.
Well, I mean, listen, I this is not apples to apples, I don't think, but I was incredibly close with my grandmother as I grew up. And I had a job after school, and I got home from school one day, and I was in my bedroom changing my clothes from school to what I was going to wear to work, and I was late, and not late like I was, not paying attention and was late, but it was that hard to get from school to home and then to this job on time. And the phone rang, and I picked up the phone, and it was my grandmother who wanted to chat. And I would have talked to my grandmother always, And so I started to talk to her, and I just said, "Grandma, I'm sorry. I have to get to work, but I don't work tomorrow. I could call you tomorrow after school." And she's like, "That's great. Call me tomorrow after school." And then the next morning while she was getting ready for work, she had a stroke and she died.
Wow.
And I just never, it's something that bothers me to this day. And I don't know if I understand academically that you don't control when people come and go out of the world, and there's no way to know, there's no light on your forehead that says tomorrow's your last day. So, but I still just think that stupid job where I was making $3 an hour working at a pet shop so I could buy gas for my car so I could afford to drive to work. You know what I mean? Like I could have been 15 minutes late to it. But then I stop and think about how much amazing time we had together, and we were very close. And I mean, 15 more minutes wouldn't have changed that, I don't think. you know?
Yeah, we're all a lot smarter in hindsight.
Yeah.
In hindsight, we're all a lot smarter. My kids fight now, and I bite my tongue from saying, you guys shouldn't be fighting because you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. I have never said that to them. But in the back of my mind, I feel like, oh, God, I wish I could give them that wisdom, that they should know that their behaviors now, it could affect you later on. Like
right.
This fighting and being mean. And I don't say anything because they have to figure out their own path, and I let them do their thing. But I wonder, like how much could have been prevented for me if my mom had stepped in. It's like, okay, you guys have to figure this out, make up or figure this out. We're not sleeping in the guest room. Like, I wonder. My mom was hands off with all of our fights, and I understand why. But I wonder, how life would have turned out differently. Had she not passed so young. But anyways.
Well, I hope you can find a way not to wonder so much because.
Yeah, I know. Just stop wondering, right?
Yeah. Because you're never going to figure it out, and it's just going to...
You're never going to figure it out, and the world is too busy anyways. My goodness, we're living in crazy times.
Yeah, your heart's going to be beat up worse than your mom's uterus was. You got to give yourself a break. So
Good point.
Well, I'm sorry that happened to you, but I do think it's important to understand because I'm imagining it's at least imprinted on you enough that the rest of the conversation, it'll be valuable for people to know that as we move forward. So... you grow up and make babies and move away and do all these things. What do you do for a living?
I am a logistics manager for a food import firm.
Is that like a lot of making sure the trains run on time, making sure things...
It's not trains, it's boats.
Boats?
Like we import food from all over the world, and we supply to the major food manufacturers here in Israel. So it's boats, basically.
Well, that's got to be incredibly important. I mean, do you have any natural resources in Israel to create food with?
To create food with, we do. We do have. We also purchase a lot. We export quite a bit. I mean, my company doesn't do any export, but the country does export.
It does.
Sure, we export quite a bit of fruits and vegetables. That's pretty big for export, but we import whatever we need, fair trade,
It's amazing. So not that this has got nothing to do with the topic, but the way Israel has figured out how to move water around the country is, it's crazy. It's absolutely otherworldly. It's amazing. So, I mean, that you can grow fruit there is kind of insane, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's something. Okay, so it's an important, interesting job. Did you move?
It's important, and it's also considered essential because it's food. So I've been working straight through this whole COVID thing.
You didn't get a COVID break?
Nope, did not get a COVID break because people have to eat even if they're stuck at home.
Yeah, no kidding. My wife has been working nonstop in my dining room for 7 months now.
7 months? Yeah, that's what we're up to.
Her company has one of the vaccinations that they're working on, and she's very diligently working on making sure that it'll be safe and reported correctly and stuff like that.
Well, let me, on behalf of the entire planet, we're all looking forward to the vaccine.
Yeah, I know. I look over there and I'm like, God, I hope they're getting close to this.
Right.
But anyway, okay, so you're diagnosed with type 1 at 45 years old.
47.
47.
Although I appreciate you making me younger than I am.
Listen, you can be however old you want if you want, but 47, I'm sorry. What were the first signs?
First signs, you know how everyone says how they don't notice the signs in their kids when they, like as a parent, people don't notice the signs. People, like everyone on your podcast has said that, how they missed all the signs.
Right.
You'd think that I would have noticed the signs in myself. But my son, who's now 15, at the time was just turning 13. So we were planning his bar mitzvah, and it was a big, glorious affair. And I was just really, really involved, and I work full time at a very intense job. So everything was just really busy and stressful and hectic. And I felt quite run down, and I blamed it on my poor kid's bar mitzvah. And after this bar mitzvah, and I just like, I'm not recovering. People make affairs all the time. People throw parties all the time. And why am I just not feeling recovered? I just felt like I was run down, and I kept blaming this poor kid. And I just I felt like I was just run down from working too hard.
Yeah.
And then the night that I got up 4 times to use the bathroom, I said, that is not okay. I'm finished nursing. There's no reason why I'm up 4 times in one night. I'm done with that. I'm done with infants. And that day I went to the doctor and I said, I think I have diabetes. He said, well, why do you think that? And I said, because I got up last night 4 times to pee. And he said, well, let's have a look. And it was 4 seconds later. And it's like, indeed, you do have diabetes.
How much of the road trip to Washington from when you were a kid, did you remember that? Or no? Of
course I remember that. That was very vivid. Second, when I woke up that morning after going to the bathroom 4 times that night, I knew.
Wow.
It would have been better had I noticed the signs, 4 weeks prior, because I wouldn't have felt so lousy by the time I actually got to the doctor. And I'd lost 30 pounds, which for the dress I was wearing at the bar mitzvah was awesome. I looked amazing, which was lovely, but I should have realized that this is not okay. Yeah. It's not okay. So by the time I went to the doctor, I was really feeling very lousy.
30 pounds is a significant amount off of anyone's frame. It really
I'm 4'10".
Well, but it just doesn't matter. Yeah. It's a big chunk of weight in a short amount of time. And if you didn't make some significant change to your caloric intake, I don't think that you would see that. I
was exercising like crazy because I wanted to fit into this dress.
Okay.
So I was exercising quite a bit. So I thought, okay, I'm doing a really good job. And I was watching what I ate because, like I said, I was planning for this party. So I assumed I was doing a really good job. And obviously, looking back now, that's ridiculous. No one looks that good. It doesn't make any sense.
David,
and I was just.
You know what? You can tell you're from another generation because if you were younger, you'd immediately have put yourself on Instagram and called yourself a workout influencer.
No. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't connect the dots because I was busy and work was very busy. Work is always busy. And that was it.
Just didn't notice.
And I went to the doctor, and when he said, oh yeah, you have diabetes, and like, okay, I'm not at all surprised. What happens now? He says, well, now you have to go to the emergency room just to make sure you're not in DKA, which I wasn't, but he just needed to rule that out. And apparently he couldn't do that in his office. That has to be done in the hospital. I don't understand that, but apparently that's the case. And the hospital was just a 2-day stay in the hospital. And they were convinced it was type 2. And I said, why are you convinced of that? Like, I'm presenting as type 1. I'm not stupid. Like, I know what the signs are.
It's in my family. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. And I'm sitting there arguing with the doctor and like, why are you saying that? I need insulin. Like, I know what I need. I need insulin. He's like, no, metformin will be good enough for now. You'll see your family doctor. He'll follow up.
So you think just based on your body construction and your age, they just assumed it was type 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure it was the age because the presentation was completely type 1. So because the medical system here is all connected, my GP who sent me to the hospital saw my discharge papers the next day. Like it's electronically transferred. So He saw them right away. And he called me and he said, you need to see an endocrinologist immediately. I've sent your file over. He's going to call you for an appointment. And it was clear to him. And the endocrinologist right away said, no, we have to test you for antibodies. This is probably not type 2. Right. And right away it was properly diagnosed.
Oh, that's excellent. That quickly. So the hospital got it wrong. And
hospital got it wrong because it was a weekend. And if you know a little bit about Israel, it was a weekend during the high holiday season. So it's like Christmas in New York. No one's working between Christmas and New Year's. It's the same thing here during the high holiday season. And it was a regular doctor on call. It wasn't an endo in the hospital who saw me. Mm-hmm. And what took so long here, and this is I don't want to say it's a flaw in the system, but although the endocrinologist over the phone had ordered the antibody test because he guessed that what was going on, I didn't actually see him for another 2 months. It took a long time because our government collapsed and we had immediate elections the day I was supposed to see him, and then he got sick, and it was like a whole story. So it took 2 months, and I'm just feeling worse and worse and worse. But 2 months later, that it was solved. So you're saying quickly. I wish it was quicker, but I guess I can't complain because I know people have it much worse.
No, that's interesting, though. Yeah. Like, so it went from, hey, you have type 2 to immediately, no, that's type 1 to 2 months to get insulin?
Yes.
Were you in
Indeed.
DKA by then?
I was not.
No.
I guess I must have been honeymooning.
Huh. Well,
must have been. I don't know. I don't know because I was definitely not in DKA. Definitely not.
So this $35 healthcare, cheap but not quick.
So Yeah, exactly. I should say that. Yes. Yeah, it's not quick.
It isn't.
It could be quicker. I think because the discharge papers said type 2, the medical system, like the way it's written into the system, didn't take it as urgent. Had anybody written down on any paper, this is a definite type 1, it would have been treated with urgency. It would have been dealt with much much quicker.
Yeah.
But because the system is all connected, anybody who looked at my file was like, oh, type 2, okay, whatever, she'll wait another week. And then that just kept happening, and the equipment just kept being pushed off until I finally got to see him. And the only reason why I got to see him after 2 months, not 3 months when they wanted me to come in, is because at that point I had gotten the antibody blood test back, and it was well over 500. And I knew what that meant because I'd been online reading, and I've been listening to you, and I knew what that meant. So I called the nurse's office and I said, I need to see this doctor immediately because I need insulin now. She said, no, you're on metformin. It takes a while. You'll still feel better. It's okay. And I said, listen, sweetheart, open up my file because I know you have access to it. And you tell me what you're seeing. And then she was like, oh, you're right. You come in today at 1:00.
No kidding.
And I was there.
Deva, you found the podcast before you found insulin?
I found a podcast before I found insulin.
How does that happen?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Because, how'd that happen? I guess I wanted to learn as much as possible so that when I would get to this appointment, I would be prepared with all my questions.
Wow.
Because otherwise you go in and you feel like you're being talked at and the doctor is just telling you what to do. And I didn't want a situation where now I have to wait another 2 months before I get to see him again with any follow-up questions. I just wanted to have everything straight in my head so that I could ask the right questions. And thank God, I went in there, I probably had 4 or 5 pages of notes of questions, and we just banged them all out because I wanted to really understand. Because that is why 6 weeks later, I had an A1C that went down from 9.5 at diagnosis to 5.7.
That's really cool.
Because I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, because you had practiced ahead of time. Like you really made sure you understood long before you got there. That's really industrious of you, seriously. Because, and I guess I don't know what to say here. Like I don't know how to guess. Were you more or less afraid of it because of your sister's
I was more afraid of it.
I would think.
Sure, I was more afraid. I was 100% more afraid. And I said, I have small children, and it is my responsibility to see them to adulthood. I cannot afford not to be around for them. And it was for sure from fear that I needed to make sure that I was very well. But I'll tell you what else helped me. Because the hospital was convinced I was type 2, I went to see a dietitian for type 2 within 2 days of being released from the hospital. So she gave me a whole regimen of how to treat type 2 in terms of low carb and low glycemic and all that stuff. So right away, I was eating in a much better way. No insulin, but I was eating so much better right away. So I just jumped right in. Yeah.
Is that something you kept up, the kind of dieting style?
Yeah. Because I was doing it for 2 months before I got the insulin. I was like, okay, 2 months, I can do it. And you know what? It's working. Yeah. And every so often, if I have to have a piece of cheesecake, I do it, but it's really not the norm because it's not worth it. It's not worth the headache, the hassle, and it's just not worth it for me. I prefer eating low carb and low glycemic, although I do eat, but it's just easier to calculate. And I'm on MDI also. And I don't know if that would be different if I was switched to a pump. I don't know. What do you hear from your listeners?
You feel like
I don't.
So you're doing lower carb. You're saying more out of a management style that it's easier to control because there's not as much fluctuation and glycemic load from foods. But you're wondering if you had a pump and you could inject more frequently, if you wouldn't try more cheesecake. Yeah. I'm assuming cheesecake is the thing you miss the most.
That is the thing I miss the most, indeed. So so that actually was a question, not a statement. So do you have an answer?
Well, I think that it's interesting. Yesterday, I've been doing this series of like how we eat conversations, getting people on that have different dieting styles. And I just interviewed Mike yesterday. It'll be up before this, but hasn't been up yet, who is eating in a completely keto lifestyle. And he described that he had had diabetes, his whole life, and it was fairly poorly controlled. He was diagnosed a very long time ago, and, insulin wasn't the same and testing wasn't the same. And he got to a point where he said that his doctor told him he was diagnosed so long ago that he wasn't going to live past 30. That was his, prognosis getting diagnosed. And when he got to 30, he was out of shape and not doing well. And a new doctor said to him, like, basically, man, you got to pull this together or you're not going to make it much longer. And so he got serious about it, dieted himself down, took care of his blood sugars more accurately. But it wasn't until he found the podcast that he really figured everything out. And then he got to the point where he really understood his insulin, was doing great, had a very much lower A1C, but then made a switch to keto. And, which is, the way he described it, it's, there's, it's just, I think he's got 29 carbs a day he eats, and it all sounds like it comes from vegetables. And his blood sugars now are just much more stable. And he says he doesn't miss those foods anymore. But the minute that that he tried to introduce something back, he didn't even feel well. So I don't know. I think it's person to person. Like, he doesn't seem to miss it. But if you did, then, if you find yourself missing certain foods at some point and you need to be more aggressive or stagger insulin differently through meals, I mean, maybe, I don't know maybe if you had a pump on, you'd take a shot at it. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I can't handle even wearing earrings. So I can't imagine walking around with a pump. That's what's stopping me, unless there was a great benefit for it. Like, I have to be able to know what problem I'm solving that a pump would actually be better. Because I don't mind the MDI. I don't mind shots. I can give 6-7 shots a day, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
If I need it, I actually don't mind the shots. If the pump would help me keep better control, then I would absolutely try it. But I'd have to really be convinced of that. And not that I'm looking to ask you to convince me, but I am still trying to figure that out, because I really, like I said, I can't even stand wearing earrings. I really find anything attached to me unpleasant. And I wear a Libra. How do you pronounce it?
Libra.
Yeah. So I do wear that, which is what they call here a CGM. And I feel like I can't live without that, and I'm not willing to give that up. So I kind of suffer through that, even though I find it very unpleasant. Uh-huh. But I do it because I feel like that's the best way to manage.
Yeah, there's a trade-off. You feel like that you don't like wearing something, but the benefit outweighs your desire not to wear something. I mean, listen, I think a pump isn't. It gives you a couple of advantages that you can't have over MDI, right? It gives you the ability to manipulate your basal insulin. So right now you're putting in your basal insulin probably once a day, and it's just working the way it works. But with a pump, you don't take that insulin, that slow acting insulin anymore. You have your fast acting insulin that's working both as your meal insulin and as your basal. And so you can tell it, between this hour and this hour, I get, 0.5 units an hour of basal. But my blood sugar tries to get high every night between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. So maybe from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., I'm going to raise my basal from 0.5 to 0.8. I don't know, like something like that. You'd have that control over that. You'd also be able to take in protein. I don't know if you're noticing that protein, as it's digested, gets transferred into glucose. So,
much later.
Right. So you could... the way Mike described it and the way others have in the past, he eats his whole, keto meal and doesn't bolus till he's done, but sometimes has to create what they call an extended bolus to stretch that insulin out over kind of the impact time of the protein rise. And that's one thing you can't do with MDI. In MDI, you'd have to inject in a little bit and inject a little bit later and try to
So that's what I do.
Yeah.
For the meals I inject, could be multiple times for one meal, depending on what I'm eating. Mm-hmm. I get that. For the basal, is there any way to manipulate basal with MDI? It's not possible.
Well, there is. It depends on which basal insulin you're using. So the much newer ones are so effective, like Baslogar, and there's a couple of them. But if you're using like Levemir, Lantus, the older ones, do you know which one you're using?
I'm using something called Toujeo. I don't know if that's a brand name.
Yeah, that's a newer one. And so if it's covering real well for you over 24 hours, then there's not much to do. Those older basals don't seem to last the whole 24 hours, even though they're supposed to. So some people split their dose every 12 hours to create a more kind of even blanket of basal insulin. That's really the only thing about manipulating basal that I would consider, and it would be with those older insulins, not the one you're using, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I guess I don't think I could talk you into wanting a pump. I don't think you need to be talked into it, honestly.
Well, I want to. I'm still looking into it. I'm thinking about it because I'm wondering if there would be a real benefit. Then I would do it. But I'd like to see my graph even better. How do you, when you define in range?
Mm-hmm.
Are you, if it's going up and down, but it's within the range? Do you call that a spike?
So what's your okay? What's your range?
I'm set between 70 and 130. That's my high and my low. Okay. 70 to 130.
And would you consider you're bouncing? Meaning, do you have to stop the rise with insulin and then stop the stop the fall with food, or is it just
within that range, within 70 to 130? Would you consider that at all a spike?
I mean, how frequently?
Because I'm trying to avoid spikes. Like, you want it to be as straight as possible. So when you're defining straight, does straight mean anything within my range that I've set? Or does straight mean a straight line with a ruler? Like, my basal overnight is a straight line like a ruler, obviously. During the day, is my goal even to get to that point? Is that possible?
So here's how I think of it. And Jenny, if you've listened to any of the pro tip episodes, like Jenny will say the same thing. You're looking for gentle rolling hills, not sharp ups and sharp downs. And a person whose pancreas does work could see a spike, 130 after a particularly heavy carb meal, could even go to 140 if there's like a lot of sugar in there. But of course, their blood sugar is going to go up and kind of gently roll back down again and get flat. So the variability, the up and the down, is not great for you. But up and down between 70 and 130, I mean, I have to be honest, I think Arden's graph mimics yours in that at times away from food, she's incredibly stable at, lower blood sugars, 85 overnight usually. And then when she gets to food, depending on the impact of that food, we could see a spike. I don't think of a spike. I think a spike in my mind is 160. So the number's not maybe as important as the percentage it moves. So if she's from 80 to 160 all of a sudden, her blood sugar has doubled. And that to me is a spike. Oh. You know what I mean? Like anything that continues on after that is still a spike. It's just more drastic. If Arden is 80 when she eats and rolls up to 120 and comes back to 80 again, I'm okay with that. And I think there are people who would tell you, no, you can accomplish that absolutely flat, straight line. And I think they're right. I think if you don't eat carbs, you absolutely can. I think if you are managing blood sugars in a younger person whose body maybe doesn't have all the hormones and other things going on, I think you can. But so is it, I think then that becomes a life balance for you. And you have to say, do I want to not eat carbs ever again to have this? If I'm okay with that, then that's the right thing. If I want cheesecake sometimes, then maybe I'm low carb most of the time, but not, around this. And I have to understand that cheesecake is going to try to make my blood sugar go up and I'm going to have to counterbalance it with more insulin. I think it's a personal preference, honestly.
So can I ask you a question?
Please. I think that's what we're going to do. Go ahead.
That's what we're doing. No, you've answered a bunch of them so far, but
good.
Now I have a straight out one. How could you say you hardly think about diabetes? You say, oh no, with my Dexcom and my Omnipod, I hardly think about it at all.
I really don't.
What you're describing now, in my mind, feels like to keep that line really straight, one would have to be thinking about diabetes all the time.
Well, how long have you had type 1 now?
Exactly 2 years.
2 years. Is it? Wait, today's not your day, is it?
No.
Okay,
September 13th. So just 2 years and 1 month.
Sometimes people end up on their anniversary date. And so that's why I asked. People are like, today's my anniversary. I'm like, did you set that up on purpose?
Probably.
How indeed. I think speaking for myself, there certainly have been many points in my life when I would not have been able to say that, and saying that would have been a lie. Now it's not, but it's an amount of time that I've been doing it for so long that it just does what I want it to do, because I'm not making a lot of mistakes. And I don't mean mistakes in a judgy way. I just mean, We get the insulin right for foods. The basal settings are where they belong. We see things coming like stress and anxiety and handle them prior. Like Arden took a PSAT the other day, and she's been, going to school from home forever now, it feels like. But she had to go into the building yesterday for the PSAT. So now all of a sudden we experienced feet on the floor. Like she got up in the morning, she had some adrenaline going because she was rushing around going to school. We bolused right away, a little bit of insulin coming out of bed for that little bump. And a short time later, when we were in the car and heading to the school, I looked and her blood sugar was 115-ish, like in that area. And I looked and saw an up kind of motion in her blood sugar, and we put more insulin in. So I put in insulin with a 115 blood sugar going into a SAT, and I guarantee you most people wouldn't do that.
No.
Right?
No.
But if they didn't, what would happen is her blood sugar would keep going up, and it would end up to be 150 or so, and then it would sit there for a couple hours because I'd say, what would I say? Oh, well, she's taking her SAT. I don't want to bother her, right? Like it would be that whole kind of free fall happens then. And none of it happened because I did the right thing at the right time. I know what the right thing at the right time is because I have a ton of experience. And no, I didn't think about it until the exact moment where we were driving down the street and I thought, oh, this is the part in the drive to school where we usually look at Arden's blood sugar. And so I said, hey, pull your phone out real quick. What's your blood sugar? And she told me, and I was like, let's put some insulin in. And she did it. And that was it. I think that whole exchange took 20 seconds. And I didn't think about it after that because I know it's going to work. And I have settings on her Dexcom in places where it will alarm before anything goes wrong so that we can, if there are smaller adjustments still left to be made, they can be made before things get out of whack. So I never let them get to that point. And if they do, and they will at some point I will mess up or, just something happens. When things get out of whack one way or the other, I'm incredibly good at fixing them quickly. But you will be too at some point.
I hope so. I feel like it's taking up a lot of my emotional headspace. And again, I don't know how much of that is related to my sister and how much of that is just because I'm new and I'm learning. And maybe I'm learning a lot all at once. I was on your podcast, like I said, before I even had insulin, like right away, I'm like learning everything. And it's just taking up a lot of my headspace. And I hope that goes away because it's too much.
Yeah. No, and I think it does. I think it lessens as time passes. I think it's about having experiences. I genuinely believe this. You have an experience, you react to it. The worst thing you can do is say to yourself, oh, like that's just diabetes. That's going to keep happening. I'm always going to have these experiences. Because if you look closely enough, you'll see what happened. You'll see that you have to bolus a 115 going into a test because the test is going to be, there's going to be some anxiety with the test. Or how about the fact that she's rolling into this test and she's going to be sedentary for a while? I know sedentary takes more insulin. There's all kinds of like little things that you don't have to, like I'm not looking up into a mental whiteboard to figure things out anymore. It's just the scenario tells my brain what to do. I don't know if that makes sense or not. It's like if you heard someone yell 2 + 2 out in the background in a conversation that you weren't in, you'd think subconsciously 4. So I think going to school for a test early in the morning, insulin. And I know how much to use because I've done it before. And her basals are really great. And that is a part of it.
Right. Well, I know I feel like my basal is correct because, like I said, I can measure it with a ruler. Like it is a straight line overnight. And I wish I could go all day fasting. I wonder if that's, if that's a possibility, I wonder about that. But that's what your podcast has given me. It's given me the courage to know, what you're doing. Like that in the back of my mind. It's like I say, I have all this anxiety, but I also have a certain calmness that comes from
some knowledge.
Feeling like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you just said now, and you reminded me, you just said now 2 + 2 = 4. Well, because everyone knows that. And when I was first diagnosed,
you didn't know that.
I was listening to 5 different podcasts, and 2 years later, yours is the only one I'm still listening to. And one of them I dropped when she said, "Oh, with diabetes, 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. 2 plus 2, I think, what was it you? One of your guests said it? Someone said it. 2 plus 2 equals a banana." And I just felt like, oh no, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, that's just not true. Like, sometimes things go wrong, but there's always a reason why it goes wrong.
But you understand why people feel that way, and so do I. And with limited knowledge and a vast misunderstanding of how insulin works, it would be very easy to think that it's completely random. And it has been, I think, until this podcast, very un-PC to suggest otherwise. I think I am the first person that I know in a modern diabetes space who said, look, you can't just sit here and act like this is all random and you have no control over it whatsoever, because then it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I'm not saying that you can be completely in control of diabetes or insulin. That's obviously not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are a lot of things that are happening to people that they don't know why, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a reason why. And they often make incredibly reasonable decisions that are 100% wrong. And my best example of this is always a person comes, onto the web board, or they contact me privately or something, and they're like, look at this graph. My kid's blood sugar, I'm always low. And then you look and I say, well, are all these lows after meals? Yes. All of your stability time is high. Like, whenever you're stable in the 140s, the 200s. And they're like, yeah. I said, well, it seems like you need more basal insulin. No, you don't understand. I'm always low. And I'm like, no, that's not what I think is happening. Here's what I think is happening. I think you don't have enough basal insulin. Because you don't have enough basal insulin, you're overcompensating at meal times with way too much meal insulin. You're putting it in, mistiming it, using too much. Your blood sugar is shooting way up, and then it comes crashing down. For some reason, the only part you see when you're trying to diagnose it is the crashing down part. Why don't you see the way up part? And so the lows so make people frightened that they can't possibly believe it. And then I just did this week with an 11-year-old boy. Doubled his basal. Kid's basal's 0.5. We made his basal 1. Mom's like, no, that's not going to work. I was like, look, you don't have to do it. It's your kid. I was like, but what I'm telling you is, why don't you try it and see what happens? By the time we had it all figured out, in 36 hours, by the way, remotely, I'm not with them, okay? 36 hours later, this kid's blood sugars are terrific. They're amazing. And all of the extra insulin she was using correcting around meals and causing lows, that's all in the basal now. And now she's not using that much insulin at meals, and everything is better. And it turned out it's the same amount of insulin in a 24-hour period. It was just all in the wrong place.
Wow. But I hope I want to get to a point where it's seamless, because what you're describing just sounds like an incredible amount of thought process, which we do what we have to do, but it's taking up too much of my life. And I don't want to be that person who's completely consumed by this.
But here's the good news. And I think I mean this. I already put the effort into it.
Yeah.
Right?
And you're sharing it.
And I just explained it, I think, as simply as it can be explained.
Right. That's true. Good point.
And so if someone hears that and says, well, no, that's not right, I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. And I might not be right. And by the way, that might not be everyone's situation. There are some people whose, basal is way too strong and they're constantly eating and causing spikes with the eating. But it's all about the same 6 problems just juggled around in different places. And I can see it now because I've looked at it so frequently. And I think the pro tip episodes of this podcast are about the best information about using about using insulin for type 1 diabetes that exists anywhere. I think it is the most digestible and easy to consume. And I would think that anyone who listened through those pro tip series, got a firm grasp of it, could have an A1C in the 6s in literally no time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So but see, the other thing here is too, you seem like a bit of a perfectionist, Deva. Could that be true?
Well, I wanted my daytime to be like my daytime graph to look like my nighttime graph, and it doesn't. Far from it. And I don't know if that's even attainable. Maybe I have to just focus, like what you said now, which is new information for me, on the percentage of the jump and not the jump itself. Maybe that's worth focusing on.
Well,
because I'm.
Well, it's interesting. I want to say, like, it doesn't look like overnight, but you're not going above 130. Is that correct?
I'm about 78 or 80% in range. So I am a little bit over 130, but not a lot, but I am sometimes. I'd like it to be less. I'd love to be 90% in range. I want to be 100% in range, you know?
And I think you will. I think that you absolutely will. But it's going to, if I'm guessing, I can't see your numbers, right? But my guess is that if you concentrate now, well, let me ask this question first. Overnight, you said you're nice and steady. Nice and steady where? What number?
90, 95.
Okay. So nice and steady 95, beautiful. Let's assume that basal's really pretty close, okay? I could make an argument for 85, but whatever. Now, next morning, we show up, you're 90, 95, 95, you eat, you go to 130, 140, 150, and you come back down again, you're 95 again after the meal's over, 2-3 hours later, yes?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yes. I want to say yes.
You probably just need a tiny bit more insulin for your meal. Maybe it needs to be timed slightly better, but you're very close to begin with. Can you picture that rolling hill in your mind?
I'm trying to.
Yeah, and you just if you eat and your blood sugar shoots straight up, comes back down and goes right back to 95 again later, you did not pre-bolus the impact of the carbs well enough, right? You didn't give the insulin time to get working before it had to fight with the carbs. If you put your insulin in and eat and your blood sugar goes up very gradually, and kind of stays up there and never comes back, and you have to put in a little more insulin to bring it down, your pre-bolus was probably pretty good. You didn't use quite enough insulin, right?
Got it. Wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I hear you.
If it shoots up and stays up, not enough insulin, not enough pre-bolus. It's just and these aren't hard and fast concrete rules. They're just great places to begin diagnosing what's happening.
Wow. Okay. I just wrote that down.
Did you really? Are you taking notes?
Oh, yeah.
When you take notes, you blow my ego way up. Don't do that. Or just don't tell me at the very least.
Oh, I shouldn't.
No,
why? But you're busy saving lives here. No, I'm serious. And I have an excellent dietitian and I have an excellent endo and I'm really happy. But somehow this just doesn't come up in those conversations. You know, they look at my graphic like, 78% in range, you're doing awesome. You know, good for you, gold sticker, which is nice, but why can't it be better?
Yeah. Well,
I wonder if their standards are too low. Like,
well, don't you? I mean, look, for you, because you have more desire, right, to do better. But you always have to think that those people they're dealing with masses of people at a time, and they don't have a way to know who they're speaking to, right? So it's a much different situation. They can't just give, They can't give, I usually say ninja level information, but I was thinking maybe Israeli army level situation for this scenario. But they can't give ninja information to people who wouldn't know how to use it. And they also don't know if their basal's correct. They don't know sometimes. I hear back from people who are like, I talked to my doctor, he doesn't understand what I'm saying. I moved my basal up, he yelled at me. Said, you're going to get low, but I'm not low. Then I showed him I'm not low, and he still said, you're going to get low. This person now, I believe, is working with outdated information or doesn't have a good firm grasp about how insulin works. How is that doctor going to give you good advice about how to change your pre-bolus time by a few minutes to stop a 130 spike? They're going to look at a 130 spike and go, this is perfect.
Right.
And because
that's exactly what I'm being told. This is perfect. And I appreciate it. I love my little gold sticker. It's adorable, but it just, and I wonder if part of him is also feeling like, because of my age, by the time the negative effects of, high glucose really affects me, I don't know.
You think he might be thinking, he might be thinking, it won't matter.
Exactly. I wonder if that's in the back of his mind. Like maybe with a kid, you'd be more aggressive because you want them to have a really long, full life, and you don't want the effects of the high blood sugars to hit them when they're still in their prime. But by me, it's like she'll be 80. What's the difference? I wonder if that's like the attitude for older people. I don't know.
Well, I can tell you this. I believe I've spoken to thousands of people about their blood sugars at this point, and you're going to be okay. I can tell when I'm talking to people. 6 months from now, you're going to send me another note and you're going to be like, oh my God, Scott, I listen to more of the podcast and you're still my best friend. And my blood sugars, I figured out how to stop that spike now. And I'm still on MDI and it's going great. Or I got a pump and that's how you're going to figure it out. I think most of this is information and drive, like a drive to do it and avoiding the drama that comes with it. Because I think that every time you get sucked into the drama, you miss the lessons. You know what I mean? Like when you're busy running around yelling, oh my God, my blood sugar, it always does this. This sucks. It's terrible. I hate diabetes. While you're doing that, you're missing what's happening right in front of you. That is the answer to how to fix it next time. And then you just have to have that experience again until you finally shut up and pay attention and see what happened.
So here's where I don't yet build well enough on my experiences, which are right in front of me. Mm-hmm. And I'm really actively working on this. Going low, and I'm sure this is I'm sure this is for other people as well. I can't imagine I'm the only nut out there who feels this way. It's terrifying. Like feeling low and starting to shake. It's so unpleasant and so scary. Yeah. I don't say always, I'm getting better, but I often overcorrect. It's like, okay, because I'm not feeling well in that moment. And it's like, okay, if I don't eat all this right now, I'm going to die, which is, of course,
the feeling you get.
I don't know.
It's your body telling you, we need carbs. Do it now. Hurry up.
Yeah, but you don't need so much. There's a limit. And I'm still trying to like sit on my hands and like tell my husband, okay, hold me back because I don't want to eat more because I know I ate enough and I just need to wait 10 minutes and I'll be fine. And I'm still working on that. But there's a good example of, what's going to happen and you've been through this and you should learn your lesson. And yet here I am, intelligent adult, not learning my lesson. And I would like to feel like experiences should be imprinted in my brain so that I don't have to think about it so much. And I'm not there yet. I'm still thinking all the time and the experiences are not seamless. And I want to get to the point where they will be and hopefully soon.
Yeah. And I have to say that if you're going to be slow on one aspect of this, that's a good one to be slow on. You know what I mean? Like it could be a real safety situation. You don't want to just like, can you imagine sitting there with a juice in your hand going, no, I'm not going to, and then pass out because you know what I mean? Because you're not sure how to handle it yet. I mean, listen, at this point, I've seen my daughter's blood sugar try to get low so many times that I can, like, when people talk about like, oh, I was low all night, I couldn't get it up. That only happens like twice a year here because when I see the low, I know how to impact it. And so once you learn how to do it, and when I say learn, I mean 100% understand how to do it. Not just like I've done it 3 times and I think I'm good at it now, but like really you've got 6-8 months, you've stopped dozens and dozens of lows. You can see on your data, especially if you're wearing a glucose monitor, right? You can see the pitch of falls and you can figure it out. Like, listen, I can correct an incredibly high blood sugar with a massive amount of insulin and introduce food that stops the insulin from creating a low. And I didn't learn that in 2 years, just so you know. It took longer than that. But
the advantage here is that the low gets corrected much faster because of the large amount of insulin, and then you give food how much later? Like
say repeat that. I didn't hear the first 2 words.
Okay, my question was: you obviously gave a lot of insulin up front because you wanted to be aggressive to treat the low, but now you have too much insulin, so now you have to give food. How much time did you wait between A and B?
So there's the thing. I can't tell you that. I can see it, but I can't tell you. It's all feeling. I just look at that graph and I'm like, now. And it's just art. It's not science. I'm sure there's a science to it. I'm sure that there's someone who could figure it out. I am not that person. And there's also a ton of variables in front of it that you don't have for your equation. And if there weren't, you wouldn't be 250 to begin with. You know what I mean? Because once you're 200, you're 250, you're 300, you're 400, you've botched something so incredibly, you can't possibly diagnose what you've botched. And so my idea there is bunch of insulin for the number. And we all know that even when you do that, it takes forever to fall down, but we need food in the future. So why don't we put in the bunch of insulin for the number and the insulin for the food, and then catch the drop with the meal? And that's one of the ways that I crush high blood sugars. But I wouldn't tell somebody to do that unless they were really practiced and incredibly confident. And I also, it's not something I would do without a glucose monitor as well. Because, but I can see the pitch in the line as it's dropping, and I have a feeling for time and distance and how much insulin when you introduce the food. And, you know, and then the goal is to bring that blood sugar in for like a smooth landing, like a plane, just down and flat. And I am pretty good at it. And other people are too who are listening, and you will be one day as well. And,
I hope so.
Yeah.
That is totally my goal. I have a last question on my list, which we didn't touch on. Have you heard among your listeners that a sensor is more accurate on one part of their body than another?
I think that people's devices are person to person about where they get their best. You'll hear people say, like, I put my pump on my thigh, it's terrific. And the next person's like, oh, my thigh doesn't work. You know, I love the back of my arm. I get bad absorption there. Like, I think it's, you know, it's about that sensor wire finding that interstitial fluid and, you know, and working there as best as possible. So you're looking for, you know, meatier places, maybe places that it's not being pulled and torqued, laid on, those kind of situations. But yeah, I would truly believe that you'll find places on your body where that Libre will work better than others. Yeah. 100%.
So you're saying that's not unusual?
No.
I've been looking it up and I haven't seen much written about that, but I was wondering about that because my right side is definitely not as accurate as my left side.
I think it's important to remember that when these products come to market, that the FDA requires them to test it in areas and prove it in areas. And that is a time-consuming process. And if it wasn't a time-consuming process, I wonder if they wouldn't test it in more areas. Meaning, I wonder if there aren't areas on some people that would work better than the FDA-approved areas for other people. And if maybe you don't have to maybe create your own little science experiment to figure it out. I always bring up Chris Freeman. He's a former Olympic cross-country skier who's been on the show a couple of times. The man has the body fat of a piece of wood. And and I've seen him wear his Omnipod and his Dexcom on his chest.
Wow.
So that's where he found that it worked for him.
Wow.
Yeah. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. Figure it out. I think that most of this is figure it out. Like when people say to me, how long, how much? I'm like, I don't know. Figure it out. Try this much, then try more. Then try a little sooner, a little later. Like you got to figure, if you're waiting for someone to tell you, do this in this exact amount at this exact time, and it's going to go perfectly. If you're expecting that, you are misunderstanding how insulin works. You know,
actually, that was one of the first lines of yours that stuck with me, where you said, I don't know, more. and since I've heard that, you've said it, you know, a bunch of times, like it comes up a lot, like, I don't know, just more.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me because that's just how you have to do it. Just don't be afraid. Be courageous, just do more, and then we'll figure it out later.
Well, in my mind, Deva, it just makes sense. If I use one and it's not enough, I mean, am I going to just come back and try one every day and go, didn't work again? That's just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And maybe my arrogance or ignorance or, you know, or just my desire to not see that happen to my daughter allowed me finally to say, I'm just going to try some more here and see what happens. But I think that for many, many people who are suffering from incredibly high blood sugars, I think it's fascinating that the first thing they don't think is, I must not have enough insulin. But I guess what happens is eventually they pile up enough insulin in the wrong place, they crash low, and that's the touchstone. I'm low. I got low today. I can't be low. I'll make my blood sugar even higher so I don't get low. I see the thinking, but it's flawed and incorrect. You don't keep your blood sugar high so that you don't get low. You keep your blood sugar stable and good so that you don't get high, so that you don't get low. That's it. They're taking out the common sense step and just adding the fear. And all of that, by the way, forget diabetes for a second. The way we think about everything is informed by the generation before us, right? We grow up with our parents telling us something, and we either recognize it to be true, believe it even though it's not true, or rebel against it because we've seen it's not right. That's it. And you could apply that to politics, the way you think about civil rights. You can apply it to insulin. If you ever really go back and listen to this podcast straight through, I'm just living diabetes the way I live everything else. That's it. It's common sense. It's taking out emotion, taking out what I think is right, because how would I know what's right? This is my first time with diabetes on my first day.
Right.
Why would I apply what I think to something I don't understand in any meaningful way? And then somebody comes in, a doctor, some nice lady in a Facebook page, something like that, and says 3 random things to you, which now you believe to be absolutely stone cold fact because that person knows more than you do. So now you just believe them word for word. The amount of people I see trying to apply a statement they heard from someone else to their life as if it's a puzzle that will fit, I think is fascinating. Like sometimes you just see people read something online and misinterpret it, and then they try to apply it like a rule for the rest of their lives and won't let go of it. We are so indoctrinated into wanting to believe that someone else knows better than we do. It's a fascinating human thing.
Oh, it's for sure true, especially in the medical, especially dealing with
sure.
medical issues, because we want to feel like we're being taken care of, like someone's taking care of us.
Yeah, listen, I don't want to get too like wavy gravy here with you, Deva, but a lot of the things you're comfortable about is really just, society building up. Just think about Linus with his blanket. Is Linus safe, or is he holding the blanket?
Right.
So he's no more safe than everybody else in that group, but he feels better because he's got his blanket that I'm assuming at some point in his life, his parents told him, you'll be safe with this, buddy, or he attached himself to it. And I think that, listen, I live in a nice neighborhood, right? You can appreciate this better than anybody, probably. I live in a nice neighborhood. It's fairly safe. That does not mean that 3 guys can't come blowing through my front door right now with guns, rape my wife, steal my kids, take all my stuff, and shoot me in the head. That doesn't mean that can't happen. And the fact that I genuinely believe that will never happen is as much true as it is a fallacy that I've created in my head by telling myself I live in a safe neighborhood. Now, am I going to run around for the rest of my life thinking that this is going to happen? I am not. But a lot of the things that we're comforted by aren't real. And, I think it happens around diabetes as well. I think we tell people things to make them feel comfortable. I think we tell people things to take away their guilt. I think we tell people things to take away their shame. And, I think for some people that might be necessary because they might be teetering on the edge. But for the rest of us, we're hearing those things like there's some sort of rules, and then we're trying to apply them to using insulin in our lives. And to me, if fire is extinguished by water, and I spray a little bit of water on it and it doesn't go out, my first thought is, oh, this must be the special kind of fire. I think more water. And I see this all in a very similar way.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It's true. Just more. You just need more.
It would. Somebody said to me the other day, "Can you help me when I put my kid in the car and go for long rides? His blood sugar goes way up. I've doubled his basal and it won't come down." And my response was, "Why does the percentage that you move the basal impact your thought process?" Because now she believes, well, I've doubled it and that didn't work, so it's not that. Where I would say, well, have you tripled it? Have you quadrupled it? Maybe the kid's body is presenting a need for insulin that you're not meeting. There is no other thing to do in this situation. Your blood sugar's higher. You need more insulin. That's it. If your blood sugar's lower, you need less insulin. it's a fairly common sense idea. But that percentage thing I want to get back to. We all do that. My kid got diagnosed. His basal rate was 0.2 an hour, and now his blood sugars are 300 all the time. I don't know. I moved his basal to 0.4. I doubled it. That has to be enough. Well, it's obviously not. But you get caught up in the number because that number now seems so big because you were working with such a small number to begin with. And by the way, if that kid's story was his basal rate was 2 units an hour and now his blood sugars are 300 all the time and I moved it to 2.3, well, it's still not right. And I know, and I hear people with type 1 talk about like shame around, like somehow someone said this to me recently. I wish I remember who it was because I thought it was such a great point. She said, somehow in the diabetes community amongst adults, using less insulin is kind of chic. Or it seems like you're doing better if you're using less. Have you ever had that thought?
I not for myself, but I've definitely heard it out there. Not for myself. I feel like, well, if that's what I need, that's what I need. That actually never impacted me personally, but I've definitely heard it out there.
Yeah.
It's like a status symbol. Oh yeah, because I'm a keto, so I don't need any insulin. Like that kind of attitude, which is.
And I'm not saying that there's not some. I don't know, right? I'm not a doctor. And I think there are probably doctors who don't know as well, but I'm not saying that if you had some amazingly perfect diet that was, 100% right for your body, that you might not use less insulin. I think that's probably true, but there's a difference between reality and what would be true in a perfect situation. And not every person can go eat a keto diet for the rest of their lives. Some people just can't pull it together. They can't do it or they don't want to. And all that's important. Your desires are important. And so if you want to, eat cheesecake, you need to understand how much insulin cheesecake takes. That's it. Boy, I'll tell you, Deva, I don't see all this as being very complicated. Am I an idiot maybe? Maybe I'm the one that's messed up. You all are just listening.
No, it's not complicated, but it's still taking up too much of my headspace.
Yeah.
But the idea of like too much insulin, so that was in my list of 5 pages worth of questions that when I saw my endo after 2 months. So one of them was, is there a maximum amount of insulin that I can take a day? Like, is there a limit that I'm allowed? Just in terms of how it impacts the rest of my body and everything. And he was like, you need to take as much as you need.
Right.
So his answer was spot on, but I wasn't in the system enough to really grasp what he meant. But he meant basically what you're saying. It's like you need what you need, and that's what you take. And he didn't put a cap on how much. I just have to get better at not thinking about it so much. And we're getting there.
Well, I appreciate it. Listen, this would be armchair psychology from me. But if I was you, I'd look at myself and say, I'm doing really well. Maybe you should take a day off. Just don't like you're eating reasonably low carb. You're good at your meals. Why don't you just not think about it for a day?
Are you serious? What? Not check?
No,
not check?
How does that Libre work? Does it have alarms? Will it tell you if you go over something?
It does not have alarms.
You said junk. All right, hold on a second. No. Well, then let's put yourself on this. Like, why don't we say this? What if you said, I'll check before a meal and I'll give myself insulin the way I usually do. And I'll pick a meal that I know I'm pretty good at. And then I will thoughtfully not look at my blood sugar again for 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
Right. And then because it's probably going to go the way you expect because you sound like you're pretty good at it. Like, I mean, how often do you see some crazy
I'm already sweating. Just listening to you say that, I am already sweating. But you know what? I take your challenge. I'm going to do it, even though I'm sweating.
Try it. And then what's the worst that could happen? Right. And then look. And then because what it's going to prove is it was okay because you know what you're doing. And then you'll be able to stop thinking about it. Then you can not look because you're afraid you're about to see a clown under your bed with a knife and you have to look, right? So, yeah, and I will say this. If you had, I don't know what the situation is in Israel, but the Dexcom G6 would fix your problem.
I know, with the alarms. Yeah, I'm looking into it. At the moment, I would have to pay for it out of pocket.
Yeah.
The Libre's free, but I would have to pay for the Dexcom right now.
And I'm not telling you to spend money you don't have. What I'm telling you is that if you could set an alarm for 130 blood sugar and eat, then you could say to yourself, I don't have to think about this again unless I hear this alarm.
Right.
And that would take away a lot of that anxiety, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because right now you have the you have the same anxiety that people have who just have a meter. You just don't have to poke your finger to check on your anxiety. You just have to hold the thing up to the thing. So I don't know. Like if I was you, I would take steps towards trying to alleviate that. Are you checking overnight?
Am I checking overnight?
Like you're not waking yourself up to check your blood sugar.
No. I'm very, at this point, I was in the beginning, but now I'm very confident that my basal overnight is going to be a straight line, and it is. And I can see when I wake up that, oh, look at that. It's been a straight line. I don't, unless something weird happens, there's no reason for me to check at night. No.
You know what? If you can't make yourself do the thing I said, try that first though. But if you can't, I would go to the weekend and tell your husband, here's the thing to check my Libre. You check it, write the number down, but do not tell me what the number is if it's under this number or over this number. So then you'll know you're safe because he hasn't come to you. And yet you'll have a little feeling for what's happening.
Okay.
There's a lot of little ways. Yeah, you have to trick your brain to stop being crazy, David. That's all.
It's amazing how easy it is for the brain to become crazy. And I thought I was a completely sane person, and apparently I'm not.
Listen,
but it's amazing how insane the brain can make you.
I grew up in the Northeast. If you grew up in a Jewish household in New York with 9 people, there's no way you're not crazy. just so you know.
3-bedroom Manhattan apartment. Oh yeah. Super fun.
One of my best friends is about the most neurotic person I've ever seen in my entire life. And he worries about things that I can't wrap my brain around worrying. And when we talk, I'll be like, Brad, why would you even think about that? And he's like, well, because, and then you can see him build a narrative around what if, and then what if, and then what if, and his what ifs spiral out of control. And I'm like, do any of those things ever happen? And he'll actually say, and he means it, he's not being funny. He'll goes, no, but what if they do? And I'm like, yo, man, you got to calm down. I don't know another way to say that. Like, I think there's a way to plan without worry. And there's an episode of this podcast, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, but worry is a waste of imagination. That is literally you making up something that may happen. It's you making up a what if. And that's not valuable. You also have to be healthy in your mind, not just your body.
Yeah. So that's my next step. Yeah. After I take your challenge to go 2 hours without checking. Okay, I'm gonna.
And then just kind of keep stretching that out. And now it turns out you cannot be my best friend because I cannot take one more person who's always what ifing me to death. Oh, I feel for you because it seems exhausting.
It's exhausting, but I think you're giving me hope that it's not going to be forever. Like I'm going to get a little bit more into it and it's going to become seamless because at the moment I'm well, but it's exhausting.
I believe that. I really do. I really do. Yeah. And I think you can get to it, especially with you have good focus. You understand the nuts and bolts. You'll now the rest of the part is just talking yourself into believing that what you know is going to happen is going to happen. That really is
otherwise known as talk myself into being less crazy. Yeah. We're working on that.
There's a Defining Diabetes episode called that because I think it's incredibly important to just see something happen so many times that you believe it so that you don't constantly wonder what if. That's all.
Right.
Yeah, you'll get to it. You really will.
I will.
Can I tell you something?
I will keep you posted.
I appreciate that. I need to apologize to you and thank you for the same thing. You really inspired me today. I was incredibly articulate.
You are articulate.
But
you're always articulate. What does that mean?
No. I spoke more than I meant to in this one, but you got me rolling on things and the thoughts were coming freely and I just didn't want to. Sometimes I fumfer through things I understand and sometimes I don't, but you caught me very clear. And I think this is going to be a favorite episode for people because I think we said a lot of important things in this.
So do I get to be considered delightful?
All right, David. Yes, you are delightful. You are 100%
I want to be delightful.
Well, I don't know why it means that much from me, but I definitely found you to be delightful. I really do.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That means a lot.
I also appreciate you doing this. What time is it where you are?
It is now 7:45 in the evening.
Yeah, I'm eating up your evening time. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. It's nice to take a break from the kids for a while. So it's all good. I lock the door and no one's bothering me.
I feel
it's
that.
A little hour of peace. It's been great.
Yeah. Don't tell Kelly this, but sometimes when I'm folding the laundry, I'm just so happy to be by myself.
Exactly.
I hate what I'm doing, but I like that I'm doing it by myself.
Exactly. Sometimes by myself it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, thank you very, very much. You've been a life changer, and I mean that like with all sincerity. A life changer, and I hope that you just get paid back thousandfold for what you're doing for the diabetic community. I really mean that.
Well, you're kind to say that, and I appreciate it. And I feel like I get more out of this than you guys do. That's for certain. First of all, I've been married a long time, so if I start pontificating like I did today, Kelly's walking out of the room. Just, when I start talking about, societal norms and, she's like, oh, here he goes. And then she's out. So I get somewhere to stretch my legs. I also get to have, I mean this, and I think it's as valuable for you all as it is for me, but having these conversations about what other people would find to be mundane diabetes ideas, they reinforce them for me. And I have more than one thought that I've never had before while I'm on the podcast. I think this podcast is helping Arden as much as it's helping you guys because, I think we're honing a blade here together. And I think it goes both ways. So I appreciate it as well.
No, it's like what we know now about diabetes and everything. It's light years ahead of what I knew as a 7-year-old when my sister got diagnosed. I'm so grateful for people like you out there teaching, because otherwise we'd still be back using urine sticks. How helpful would that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't listen. You can't undervalue the movement of technology.
It's been incredible. Yeah, but the technology doesn't help if you don't know what you're doing with it. So the fact that I'm wearing a sensor, that's very nice. If I didn't understand it, that wouldn't help me at all.
I'm beginning to lump this podcast in with that because it's a tool to talk to people that just didn't exist before this kind of tech. I mean, honestly, I'm sitting with a microphone and a computer and some equipment most people don't have. But other than that, I'm just putting my thoughts online and they're reaching. I think that this is part of it. I think texting is an amazing part of parenting with diabetes.
Right.
I think that insulin pumps and glucose monitors and insulin that works better, that kind of stuff, even to say now, like glucagon being in a hypopen, like that, that's a big deal for people who are scared. And there are a lot of people who are scared. And then this podcast, being able to talk to people like this, I think is incredibly valuable. I have to say, I was very proud of myself at the point in the show when you said that you started listening to a bunch of diabetes podcasts, but now only listen to this one. I was proud of myself because I want very badly to know what those shows are, but I don't want you to say on them.
Well, I'm not going to say the names because, that's rude, but exactly. I will say what the main focus was just like a lot of, oh, you're okay, you're so wonderful, you're fine. Just like commiserating and venting, which I guess for some people that's helpful. But for me, it's like, I don't want to vent. I don't want to commiserate. I want to learn. I want to do this better. Like that's the whole point. How we make this better. Yeah. Why are you accepting the status quo by venting and commiserating and having everyone, hug you? That's not what this is about. This is, you need to learn to do this better. And if you're not learning, then I don't have time for you. Like if you're not learning, then what's the point?
It's funny because in my heart, I think I do the comfort stuff too. I just think I spend about 30 seconds on it. And then we move on to the stuff that makes you not feel like you need to be comforted anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like a lot of these online forums, you see that as well. So I just stopped all that because I'm not interested in comfort. I have, I have that in my life right now. I need to learn how am I making this better. And that's what you're giving us. And that's like I said, life-changing, literally life-changing, not just, the fuzzy wuzzy comfort kind of life-changing, literally life-changing, where I'm going to be able to live till 100 with both my feet intact. Yep. That's my goal.
When you hear me say that it's nice to know you're not alone at 2 a.m. when you're fighting a low, but it would be better to not be fighting a low at 2 a.m. That's what I'm saying. I was approached this week about writing a blog post for a pretty big blog, right? And they're like, we keep hearing about your podcast and would you come write something? And I'm like, I don't want to, but all right. So I started talking to them about it. And right away, it's like, well, don't talk about any of the things that you talk about in the podcast. And I was like,
what do they want from you?
I was like, what? She's like, well, nothing about how you use insulin or about, and I was like, so you heard about me because the podcast is so popular, but you would like me not to say any of the things in the blog post that we talk about in the podcast. Is that correct? And she's like, yeah, that's what I need. And I said, that's why the podcast is so popular, right? And she said, why? I said, because the rest of you are just pumping out banal bullshit people with diabetes. That's why.
Exactly.
And that's why this podcast is popular. You think it's me? If it's me, it's because I'm saying it. But it could be anybody. It could be anybody that understood who was willing to speak up. It could be. But now, guess what? Now it's too late. Now the podcast is so popular. I am so far ahead of it. It just doesn't. It's an institution at this point. Like you know what I mean? And I've always been driven by that. Even when I wrote on a blog, I just would look up and think, why are you all saying the same unhelpful stuff over and over again? People are like, oh, who has a great blog? This one does. And you'd go read it. You couldn't tell the difference between that one and that one. It was all just like you were talking about it. And it was really nice stuff. And I genuinely think it has an incredible amount of value. But how many people do we need saying it's just a number? We need 4,000 people saying that? Because at some point, in an attempt to make people feel better, what you make them is apathetic. And that's not helping them as much as you think it is.
Right.
I just don't buy into that.
Once they're apathetic, then they stop trying to help themselves. And then before you know it, half the community is, blind. Like that makes no sense to me.
It's a huge it really is. It's the communication equivalent of people misunderstanding the basal insulin. I saw a low, so now I keep my blood sugar at 250. Some people have a lot of anxiety around that number. So I'm going to say out loud to everyone, it's just a number. But what you were really trying to do is protect the people who have like a genuine anxiety issue around it. So isn't it possible? Why is it always, I keep saying this, but why is everything always one or the other? Isn't it possible to say, hey, listen, if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety around seeing your blood sugar, I really encourage you to think about it as a number. And for the rest of you who are not feeling that, here are some ways to keep that number from being anxiety ridden to begin with. And for you with the anxiety, we'll go slower with you, and we're going to find a way to get this okay for you. And by the way, some people fall through the cracks, and that's no one's problem. No, excuse me, no one's fault. Why is common sense? Why do we always dumb everything down to the very bottom of everything? You know what's incredible at this moment, Deva? I'm incredibly liberal and I sound conservative. So, but you can't just say you can't least common denominator people's health.
That's what the doctors are doing.
Yeah, no, they're ruining 9 people's health because one person can't handle the information, and that what? That just doesn't make any sense.
No.
I'm not up for that, I guess. And so if that led
obviously not, because you're putting in all this time and energy, and on behalf of all of, like I said, the diabetic community, we appreciate it.
Dave, I appreciate you saying that, but listen, I need to leave a repository.
Have an awesome day.
Yeah. But no, I was going to tell you, I need to leave a repository behind for my daughter. That's what this podcast is. That it's helping all you guys is a nice bonus. But I need to take what's in my head and put it here, because I think one day I'm going to drop dead, right? And she's going to go, how was my dad so good at this diabetes thing? Because she's not me, right? People want to make that point. Adults love to ask me, well, how are you going to pass this on to your daughter? That's another fallacy. That's another, I live in a safe neighborhood. I don't know how you're going to pass it on to your daughter. You can't, because they're little. And their brains are mushy, and they don't have any of my life experiences. They don't jump to conclusions about common sense because they don't have common sense. They're still building all that stuff. I need this podcast to be available the day my daughter, as an adult, realizes, holy shit, that guy knew what he was talking about. And
now I'm doing it by myself, and now I'm on my own.
And now I'm going to go back and listen to that podcast. I'm going to take 500, 1,000 hours of my life and make myself as good at diabetes as my dad was. And maybe she won't do that. But if she has that thought, this is going to be here for her, because I'm going to pay my goal is to save up enough money to pay so that the podcast can be available, forever. Like I one of the things I want to do at my death is pay the company who hosts this podcast to keep hosting it.
Wow.
You know, so
yeah.
It is that it's just you can't learn life in a day. And my path somehow turned me into the kind of person who sees diabetes the way I see it and talks about it the way I talk about it. Just like when you hear Jenny, like you don't think there are other smart people who've had diabetes for 32 years who are into fitness, but why is Jenny so good at talking about it? Right? It's her whole life. It's an amalgam of who she is when she puts it out there. I think that's the same for me and for anybody else who's good at something. You didn't just sit down one day. If anybody thinks I just thought, oh, I'm going to make a diabetes podcast and I'll just do it really good so people like it. That's not how this works. I could have started this podcast and it could have been crap and no one could have listened to it. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of other people out there proving that with a lot of other podcasts. And I don't just mean about diabetes. I mean, just in general, people have that thought like, oh, I'm interesting. And then they start talking. I'm like, oh, like I've tried some podcasts and I'm 8 minutes into it. And I think no one could be listening to this. You know, like who would listen to this? I don't think the guy making it would listen to it. But that, again, it's not a brag. It's just what it is. Like I can't do a high jump. I can't run a 60-yard dash in an incredible amount of time. There are things I'm terrible at. I'm good at this. So that's dumb luck. It really is. I've heard people say it to me. I'm sorry your daughter has diabetes, but saved my life.
Okay.
You know, so
I am kind of sorry she has diabetes, but it's if she has to have it, I'm glad that she's in your family, that you're there for her.
I think the unspoken part of that sentence is, if some kid's going to get diabetes, I'm glad it's the daughter of the guy who can talk about diabetes like this.
Is that a horrible thing to say?
I don't think so. I get it.
It's the reality. You are the best person to be caring for her. So
let's leave it with I'm the best person. That makes me feel good.
Okay, you are the best person, Scott. I like that.
I'm kidding. Of course, after all this talking, someone's going to take that incredibly seriously. But no, seriously, I'm just happy. I'm literally happy that the thing I did helped you.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah.
My greater point is that I could have been a person who put this out in the world, and you could have listened to it and gone, well, this is not valuable, and walked away from it. And I'm just happy that it worked out this way. And by the way, I mean this, if I shouldn't be doing this, meaning if people don't connect with it, I would very much want to move on to something else. Like, I would be horrified to think that I was pumping out a podcast for people every week that nobody listened to and nobody cared about. I'd be like, why am I wasting my time with that? You know? Okay,
well, let me put that back at you. Yeah. How long before this episode airs?
Oh, well, I really liked it, so it's going to move way up.
Oh, because I was going to say, if you have episodes 3-4 months out, clearly you have what to say, and clearly people are out there listening. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's the point. Like, I know often you have episodes far out into the future, so that just proves that
I see what
there's
you're saying.
Still a lot to do.
If this went into the general rotation, you'd hear it in March of 2021. But
wow,
I had a good time with it, so I think it's going to go out sooner. Plus, you're in a really unique situation. I've had a lot of men lately, and I need to mix in some women. So that's my super. By the way, if anybody's listening, trying to figure out you're like, oh, I wonder why his podcast is more popular than mine. I mix men and women back and forth, which, by the way, has nothing to do why it's popular. I just think it's a nice thing to do, so you guys don't hear similar voices like week after week, But anyway, all right, you were terrific. You lit me on fire, by the way. If your husband ever goes down, I don't know if I want to live in Israel, but I think you and I would get along. So, and I'm not taking care of those kids. Just so
you're my best friend, so certainly that has to mean something.
I do think it does. By the way, please.
Bye. Have a good day.
You have a great day. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to eat dinner. You go eat lunch.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Did I tell you this was going to be a great episode? Why would I lie? There's no reason. Thank you so much, Deva, for coming on the show and sharing your broad, expansive story and your heart. It was really lovely. I want to just point out that at the end of the episode, I told her it would be out like a couple of months ago because I was moving it up. But the great episodes have just piled up to the point where I can't do that. I'd have to start giving you guys like 5 episodes a week to get them out at the pace that I would have needed to keep my promise. There are just too many good episodes. I got to pace them a little bit. You guys can't listen every day. You have lives. I imagine you have a life. Don't forget to go to the T1D Exchange. That's at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Click on Join Our Registry now and fill out the brief survey. All you need to be is a type 1, the caregiver of a type 1, be from the United States, and have a few minutes to want to do a nice thing for other people. That's all you got to be. If you're those things, this is going to work out great for you. If you're new to the podcast and looking for the Diabetes Pro Tip series, it begins at episode 210 in your podcast app, or you can find them at juiceboxpodcast.com or diabetesprotip.com. The Defining Diabetes series is also there, as well as links to all the things about the podcast that you might care about. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Scroll down, take a look. All the After Dark episodes are there, and all the ones about algorithm-based pumping. There's some blog posts that I think are pretty terrific. Recent episodes, pro tip episodes. So much to choose from. If you're listening in a podcast app, please hit subscribe or follow. And of course, if you're enjoying the show, please share it with someone who you think might also enjoy it.